I couldn't do this without you.
You know I'm always here.
I know, and I love you. You don't need to work. I can provide anything you need.
But I have dreams. This place is lovely. It really is. I'm so glad we could do this. Two more nights like this. I'm fine and happy. But you had dreams. What is going on?
Let me ask you something, Madison said, stirring her coffee slowly. When did you disappear?
Elena blinked.
What? Madison leaned forward. When did you stop being you? A long silence stretched between them. The cafe was loud. Espresso machines hissing, chairs scraping, soft indie music playing. But somehow the table felt isolated. I didn't disappear, Elena said quietly. I just grew up. Madison tilted her head.
No.
You adjusted. There's a difference. Elena forced a laugh. I'm married. I have 2 kids. This is life. And your PhD? Madison asked gently. Elena's fingers tightened around her cup. And the conferences you wanted to speak at? Madison continued. The leadership workshops? The nonprofit you wanted to build? Plans change, Elena replied. Or, Madison said softly, people shrink. That word hit harder than it should have. Shrink. I didn't shrink, Elena whispered. I chose love. Madison's voice softened. Love should expand you, not erase you. Silence. Across the cafe, a couple laughed loudly. A barista called out a name. The world kept moving. But at that table, time paused. Are you happy? Madison finally asked. Elena opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because for the first time in years, she realized she didn't know. And that is how this story begins. Not with betrayal, not with scandal, not with abuse, but with a question most women are too afraid to answer. When did I disappear? If you're married, engaged, dating, or even happily single, don't rush past the story. Because sometimes the greatest loss in a woman's life doesn't look like tragedy. It looks like compromise. And sometimes the most dangerous word in a relationship is okay. Let's begin. Elena Brooks was 23 years old when she believed her life was just beginning. She lived in Portland, Oregon, a city of rain-soaked mornings, coffee shops filled with ambition, and streets lined with possibility. She had just completed her graduate internship in organizational psychology and had plans so carefully mapped out that her notebooks looked like blueprints for a skyscraper. Elena didn't just dream. She structured her dreams. She wanted a PhD in human resource development. She wanted to help companies create healthy work cultures. She wanted to mentor young professionals. She wanted to speak at conferences. She wanted to write, not because she wanted applause, but because she wanted impact. She carried her goals the way some people carried heirlooms, polished, protected, and close to her chest. Her father used to say, if you're going to build something, build it so strong no one can shake it. She took that seriously. Her mother, however, saw life differently. Degrees don't keep you warm at night, her mother would often say with a gentle but knowing smile. A good husband does. Elena would laugh it off. I can have both, Mom. And she believed it. She truly did. At 23, she felt time was on her side. She woke up early, went for runs along the Willamette River, read leadership books in the evening, and wrote long-term plans on Sunday afternoons. She wasn't rushing. She wasn't desperate. She was becoming. But life has a way of testing conviction when love enters the picture. And then she met him. His name was Ryan Mitchell. Ryan was 31, confident, grounded, a commercial airline pilot based in Seattle. Tall, steady voice, calm presence. The kind of man who made waiters stand straighter and strangers listen when he spoke. He didn't chase loudly. He pursued steadily. He admired her intelligence. He asked about her research interests. He told her he found ambition attractive. He said he didn't want a small-minded woman. Elena felt seen. Not just as pretty, not just as young, but as capable. And that meant everything. Their relationship moved quickly, not recklessly, but with momentum. Weekend visits turned into meeting families. Meeting families turned into conversations about the future. Her mother adored him immediately. A pilot? She whispered one night after Ryan left. Elena, do you know how many women pray for something like this? Her father was quieter. What's the timeline? He asked during a family dinner. Ryan answered smoothly. I believe when you know, you know.
Elena smiled.
She did feel something real. But inside her, there was a soft whisper. Not fear, not doubt, just not yet. She pushed it aside. Maybe it was commitment anxiety. Maybe it was overthinking. Maybe it was selfishness. Friends began to chime in. You can always finish school after marriage. Ryan's stable. Do you know how rare that is? Don't overcomplicate something good. And slowly, the noise outside grew louder than the voice inside. One evening, sitting on her apartment floor surrounded by graduate school brochures, Ryan held her hands and said, I don't want to build a future without you in it. It was romantic. It was sincere. It was heavy. She looked at her 5-year plan taped to the wall. PhD applications, 2025. Research fellowship, 2026. Conference presentation, 2027. She took it down. Not dramatically, just quietly. When he proposed 6 months later, she said yes. Not with wild excitement, not with tears, but with a steady breath and a quiet sacrifice. The wedding was beautiful, elegant but tasteful. White roses, soft music, family beaming. Social media flooded with captions about God's perfect timing. Elena smiled in every photo, and she meant it. She loved him, but love, as she would learn, is not the same thing as readiness. Marriage began gently. New apartment, shared routines, Sunday grocery trips, laughter, late-night movies. Ryan was attentive at first, proud to introduce her as his wife. He encouraged her to take some time before jumping into doctoral programs. "You've been in school your whole life," he said. "Relax. Enjoy this season." She agreed. Just 1 year, she told herself. 1 year won't hurt. But 1 year became 2. Then came the pregnancy. It wasn't planned, but it wasn't unwelcome. Ryan was thrilled. Her mother cried tears of joy. Her father hugged her longer than usual.
Elena smiled.
But something inside her felt paused. She told herself this was just a detour, not a destination. Motherhood arrived like a storm wrapped in beauty. Sleepless nights, feeding schedules, laundry piles, identity shifts. Her days blurred. Her body changed. Her time disappeared. She loved her son fiercely, but she began to miss herself. The girl who ran at sunrise. The girl who mapped 5-year plans. The girl who believed time was abundant. One evening, while rocking the baby to sleep, she opened her laptop and looked at doctoral program deadlines. Applications closed in 2 weeks. She hadn't prepared anything. Ryan walked in. "What are you doing?" "Just looking," she said softly. "At school stuff again?" he sighed. "Elena, we just had a baby. Let's focus on what matters." The sentence wasn't cruel, but it was dismissive, and something inside her dimmed. Moral lesson number 1. Love should never require you to shrink. Not immediately, not loudly, but gradually. Elena began negotiating herself away. "I'll apply next year. I'll wait until things settle. I'll start when he's older." And every delay felt reasonable, until reasonable became permanent. The world praised her. "She's such a devoted wife. She's glowing. She's blessed." But no one asked, what did she give up to glow? Years have a way of moving silently. And by 27, Elena no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. Not because she wasn't beautiful, but because she wasn't becoming. She was surviving. And survival is not the same thing as fulfillment. Act 1 closes not with disaster, but with a quiet truth. The most dangerous compromises are the ones that feel loving. To every young woman listening, it is not wrong to love. It is not wrong to marry. It is not wrong to build a family. But it is dangerous to abandon yourself in the process. Because when you silence your own calling long enough, one day it stops knocking. By the time Elena turned 28, her life looked perfect from the outside. 2 children now, a 4-year-old son and a toddler daughter with soft curls and curious eyes. A beautiful townhouse in a quiet Seattle suburb. A husband with a respected career. Family holiday photos framed neatly along the hallway wall. If you scrolled through her social media, you would see smiles. Matching pajamas at Christmas. Beach vacations in California. Anniversary dinners with candlelight and captions about gratitude. But what you would not see was the quiet erosion. It didn't happen overnight. It happened in conversations, in tones, in small, repeated dismissals. After their daughter was born, Elena mentioned school again. "I've been thinking," she began one evening while clearing dishes. "Maybe I could start with one online course, just to ease back in." Ryan didn't look up from his phone. "Why now?" "I don't know," she said gently. I miss learning." He exhaled, not angrily but tired. "Elena, we're barely balancing schedules as it is. I'm flying cross-country half the month. The kids need stability. This isn't the season for you to start chasing degrees." Chasing degrees. The phrase lingered in the air, as if her ambition were a hobby, as if her calling were optional. She nodded. "Okay." That word again. "Okay." It became her most used response. "Okay, I understand. Okay, maybe later. Okay, you're right. Okay, I'll adjust." Adjustment slowly became surrender. At first, Ryan's tone was protective. Then it became practical. Then it became critical. "You're always tired. The house feels chaotic. Other women manage this better." Those sentences were not shouted. They were stated, matter of fact. But words don't have to be loud to be heavy. Elena began waking earlier to compensate, sleeping later to compensate, smiling more to compensate. She joined a mother's group at church. She volunteered at school events. She kept the house spotless. She cooked balanced meals. She ironed his shirts. She tried to earn approval she didn't know she had lost. One afternoon, while folding laundry, she caught her reflection in the mirror across the room. Her hair was tied back loosely. Dark circles rested under her eyes. She looked older than 28. Not physically, but spiritually. She whispered to herself, "Where did you go?" The girl who color-coded goals. The girl who believed she would speak on stages. The girl who refused to shrink. She was fading, and fading quietly is the most dangerous kind of loss. Moral lesson number 2. When you silence yourself repeatedly, you don't become peaceful. You become invisible. Ryan began coming home later on his off days. Not always for bad reasons. Sometimes he just stayed out with colleagues, aviation friends, networking events. But when he returned, there was distance. Small irritations turned into criticisms. "You're too sensitive. Why do you overthink everything? You're always emotional." She stopped expressing concerns. She became agreeable, and agreeable slowly turned into erased. One evening, during an argument that started over something small, grocery spending of all things, Ryan said something that pierced deeper than he realized. "I carry this family financially. The least you can do is keep things running smoothly. The least you can do." Elena stood still. She wanted to respond. She wanted to remind him that unpaid labor is still labor, that raising children is work, that emotional management is work. But she didn't. Instead, she apologized. "I'll do better." And that night, while the children slept and the house was silent, she cried quietly in the bathroom so no one would hear. Not because he yelled, not because he hit her, but because she was disappearing in plain sight. The next morning, she packed lunches with swollen eyes and a steady smile. No one noticed. Life continued. Years have a way of blurring when you're not growing. By 30, Elena no longer introduced herself with dreams. She introduced herself as Ryan's wife or the kids' mom. Her world had narrowed to routines, school drop-offs, grocery lists, flight schedules, meal prep, laundry cycles. She stopped buying books about leadership, stopped reading research journals, stopped checking application deadlines, felt pointless. One Sunday afternoon, while visiting her parents in Portland, her father pulled her aside. "You're quieter these days," he observed gently. "I'm just tired," she replied. He studied her face. "Elena, are you happy?" The question stunned her. She hadn't asked herself that in years. Happiness had been replaced with responsibility. "I'm fine," she said, "and the saddest lies are the ones we tell softly." That night, back home, she scrolled through LinkedIn for the first time in years. Former classmates were publishing papers, speaking at conferences, leading HR departments, launching startups. Not better than her, just moving. She stared at the screen long after the house went quiet. Regret is not loud at first. It whispers, "You were meant for more." And for the first time in years, she didn't silence the whisper. She let it sit. She let it ache. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. At a grocery store, while reaching for cereal, she heard her name.
Elena.
She turned. Time folded. It was Madison Carter, her graduate school roommate. Madison looked confident, grounded, alive. They hugged in the cereal aisle, laughing in disbelief. "You look amazing," Madison said. "You too," Elena replied automatically. They grabbed coffee right there inside the store cafe. Madison spoke about her doctoral research, her consulting work, her struggles balancing relationships and career, her therapy journey, her broken engagement that she ended because she wasn't finished becoming.
Elena Listened.
Quiet, not jealous, but grieving. Madison asked gently, "Are you still planning your PhD?"
Elena hesitated.
"I haven't thought about it in a while." Madison tilted her head. "That was your dream." The sentence landed heavily, was past tense. That night, Elena lay awake beside Ryan, staring at the ceiling. She replayed everything. The proposals she never submitted, the courses she never took, the conferences she never attended, the version of herself she abandoned. She realized something powerful. She hadn't been forced. She had chosen comfort over courage, chosen approval over alignment, chosen peace over purpose. And while none of those choices were evil, They were costly. Moral lesson number 3. Sometimes the cage isn't locked. You just forgot you could open the door. The next morning, she did something small. She enrolled in a single online certification course. She didn't announce it. She didn't debate it. She just did it. Felt rebellious. Felt terrifying. Felt alive. When Ryan found out, he frowned. Why would you add stress to your plate? It's one course, she replied calmly. We don't need the extra income. It's not about income. That was the first time she had said something without apologizing. He noticed. You've changed, he said later that week, and for the first time she answered honestly. Yes, the shift was subtle, but it was real, and growth always disrupts environments that benefited from your silence. Act 2 closes here, not with divorce, not with explosion, not with drama, but with awakening, because the most powerful transformation does not begin with escape. It begins with awareness, and awareness had finally found her. In Act 3, the tension will rise, because when a woman starts remembering who she is, everyone around her must adjust, or resist. By the time Elena turned 31, something inside her had shifted permanently. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was irreversible. The online certification course she enrolled in had awakened a part of her she thought had died. At first, she studied quietly at the kitchen table after the children went to sleep. The glow of her laptop screen became her midnight companion. While the rest of the house rested, she read case studies, analyzed workplace dynamics, and wrote discussion posts with a hunger she hadn't felt in years. She remembered how it felt to think deeply, to stretch her mind, to exist outside of diapers, meal plans, and flight schedules. The first time she submitted an assignment and received feedback that read, "Exceptional analysis. You have strong leadership insight." She stared at the screen longer than necessary. Exceptional. The word echoed. No one had used language like that about her in a long time. Not since before marriage. Not since before she had reduced herself to maintenance mode. She didn't tell Ryan about the compliment. She simply carried it inside like a small, glowing ember. But embers, if protected, can become fire. Ryan noticed the difference before she said anything. She walked differently. She spoke more directly. She didn't rush to fill silence with apologies anymore. One evening, when he criticized the way she handled a scheduling mix-up with the kids' appointments, she didn't shrink. "I made a mistake," she said calmly. "It doesn't mean I'm incompetent." He blinked. The old Elena would have apologized 3 times. The new one held eye contact. That was the beginning of friction. Not explosive fights, but subtle resistance. "You're always on that laptop now. You seem distracted. Are you trying to prove something?" The last question lingered. Was she? Maybe. But not to him. To herself. She wasn't trying to prove she was better. She was trying to prove she still existed. Growth disrupts comfort, and Ryan had grown comfortable with a version of Elena that revolved around him. Now she revolved around purpose again. It unsettled him. Arguments began increasing in frequency. Small things turned into larger conversations about priorities and roles. One night, after the kids were asleep, he sat across from her at the dining table. "I feel like I'm losing my wife," he said. She felt the weight of that sentence. "You're not losing me," she replied softly. "I'm finding myself." He shook his head. "It feels like you're pulling away." "I pulled away from myself years ago," she said quietly. "I'm just coming back." Silence filled the room. He didn't understand. Not fully, because from his perspective, nothing was broken. The house ran smoothly. The children were healthy. Bills were paid. Vacations were taken. He thought stability equaled fulfillment. But stability without identity becomes suffocation. Elena didn't want to leave her marriage. She wanted to expand within it. But expansion requires space. And space requires agreement. Ryan was used to being the center. Now he felt displaced. One afternoon, during a heated disagreement about her enrolling in a second course, he said something that struck deeper than he intended. "You're acting like you sacrificed everything. I never told you to stop." The words stunned her. Technically, he was right. He hadn't forced her. But influence doesn't need to shout to be powerful. "You didn't tell me to stop," she replied slowly. "But you never encouraged me to continue." He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, because that was true. Encouragement had been replaced with convenience. That night, Elena lay awake again, but this time not in regret, in clarity. She had participated in her own shrinking, and now she was participating in her own rebuilding. Moral lesson number 4. No one can abandon your dream without your permission. But once you wake up, you don't have to keep granting it. Weeks turned into months. Her certification finished. She began taking small freelance consulting projects remotely. Nothing huge, just organizational assessments for small startups. The first time she earned her own direct deposit again, she stared at the notification on her phone. It wasn't about the amount. It was about capability. "I still can," she whispered. Ryan noticed the payments. "You didn't tell me you were charging for this." "I didn't think I needed permission," she answered. The tension sharpened. "You're different," he repeated. "Yes," she said again. This time, there was no apology in her voice. The more she grew, the more the imbalance in their relationship surfaced. Not because she wanted power, but because she wanted partnership. During one particularly difficult argument, he said the sentence that changed everything. "If having a big career mattered that much, you shouldn't have gotten married." The room went still. The air felt thin. She stared at him, not angry, but awakened. In that moment, she realized something critical. He had loved the version of her that was available. Not the version that was ambitious. Not the version that required negotiation. Not the version that refused to shrink. And that hurt, not because he was evil, but because it meant their visions of marriage were misaligned. Marriage to him meant stability and roles. Marriage to her meant growth and evolution. Those are not the same thing. That night she didn't cry. She didn't yell. She didn't plead. She packed a small overnight bag for herself and the children. Not to leave permanently, but to breathe. She drove to her parents' house in Portland the next morning. The drive was long and quiet. Her son asked, "Are we on vacation?" "In a way," she replied gently. Her father opened the door before she even knocked. He looked at her carefully, not at her clothes, not at the children, at her eyes. "You look awake," he said. She hadn't realized she had been asleep. Her mother was concerned. "Marriage has storms," she warned. "Don't run at every wind." "I'm not running," Elena said softly. "I'm thinking." And thinking was something she hadn't allowed herself to do freely in years. During those days at her parents' home, she took long walks alone.
No stroller.
No schedule.
No expectations.
Just air. Just space. She asked herself hard questions. Was she willing to lose her marriage for her growth? Was she willing to stay and shrink again? Was there a middle ground? She realized something profound. The problem was not marriage. The problem was abandoning herself to maintain it. Moral lesson number 5. You cannot build a peaceful home on top of a silenced soul. After a week, she returned home. Not defeated, not aggressive, but defined. She sat across from Ryan at the kitchen table, the same table where she once folded away her ambitions. "I'm not leaving," she said calmly, "but I am not shrinking again." He listened. "I need space to grow," she continued, "not to compete with you. Not to disrespect you, but to remain myself." He looked tired, confused, threatened, but also reflective. For the first time, he saw that this wasn't rebellion. It was restoration. "I don't want to lose you," he admitted quietly. "Then don't ask me to disappear," she replied. The rebuilding would not be instant. Trust had to be renegotiated. Roles had to be redefined. Egos had to be confronted. But something fundamental had changed. Elena was no longer asking for permission to exist. And that is where real transformation begins. Act 3 does not end with resolution. It ends with confrontation, because before healing comes honesty, and honesty had finally entered their marriage. The question now was not whether she would grow. She would. The question was whether the marriage could grow with her, and that answer would unfold in what came next. When Elena returned home after that week away, the house felt the same, but she didn't. The couch was still in the same corner. The children's toys were still scattered near the stairs. Ryan's flight schedule was still pinned to the refrigerator. On the surface, nothing had shifted, but internally everything had. She no longer walked on emotional eggshells. She no longer apologized for existing, and that subtle difference changed the atmosphere immediately. The first few days were tense. Not hostile, just careful. Conversations were measured. Movements were cautious. Even the children seemed to sense that something unspoken was being negotiated in the air. Ryan tried to return to normal quickly. He brought flowers one evening, suggested a family movie night, complimented dinner, old gestures. But Elena could now see the difference between affection and avoidance. One night, after the children were asleep, she sat across from him again. "We can't pretend nothing happened," she said calmly. He leaned back in his chair, guarded but listening. "I don't want to fight you," she continued. "I want partnership. But partnership requires room for both people." He exhaled slowly. "I didn't realize you felt that trapped." "I didn't either," she admitted. "Until I did." There it was, the truth neither of them had wanted to face. She hadn't been physically restrained. She hadn't been abused. She hadn't been forbidden from dreaming. She had simply adjusted herself so thoroughly that she disappeared. And he had grown comfortable in that version of her. Comfort can be dangerous when it benefits one person more than the other. The next few weeks became uncomfortable but necessary. They started couples counseling, something Ryan resisted at first. "We're not that bad," he said. "It's not about being bad," Elena replied. "It's about being honest." The first session was awkward. They sat side by side on a neutral-colored couch in a quiet office overlooking downtown Seattle. The therapist asked simple questions. "When did you feel most connected? When did you begin feeling distant?"
Elena answered slowly, carefully.
She spoke about postponing school, about wanting encouragement, about slowly losing confidence. Ryan listened, really listened, and for the first time he heard the accumulation. Not one dramatic moment, but years of small dismissals. In the third session, he admitted something he hadn't fully understood before. "I think I was scared," he said quietly. "If she grew too much, I wouldn't matter as much." That confession stunned Elena, not because it excused everything, but because it revealed insecurity where she had assumed indifference. Fear often disguises itself as control, and insecurity often disguises itself as criticism. The counselor nodded gently. When one partner evolves, the other must decide whether to evolve too or resist. That sentence hung between them. Elena didn't want to outgrow her marriage. She wanted to grow within it. But growth requires courage from both sides. At home, they began renegotiating roles. Not dramatically, but intentionally. Ryan adjusted his flight schedule to be home more predictably. Elena blocked out study hours on the shared calendar. Not hidden, not secret. Visible, valid. The first time she declined a last-minute social invitation because she had coursework to complete, she braced for irritation. Instead, Ryan simply nodded. Okay. The same word she had used for years. Now it came from him. Progress isn't always loud. Sometimes it sounds like one less dismissal. Her consulting work expanded slowly. A startup referred her to another client, then another. She wasn't yet earning what Ryan earned, but that was never the point. The point was identity. The point was competence. The point was remembering she had something to offer the world beyond domestic management. One afternoon, while preparing a presentation for a small leadership workshop, she paused. Her laptop screen reflected her face. Not exhausted, not hollow, focused, alive. She felt something she hadn't felt in nearly a decade. Alignment. Meanwhile, the marriage continued adjusting under pressure. There were still arguments, still moments of defensiveness. Growth does not erase tension, it exposes it. One evening, after she returned from facilitating a half-day workshop, Ryan made an offhand comment. So now you're a corporate expert? The old Elena would have laughed it off. The new Elena held his gaze. I'm building something, she said evenly. You don't have to mock it to feel secure. He froze. The sentence landed hard, not because it was cruel, but because it was accurate. Later that night, he apologized. Not sarcastically, not dismissively, sincerely. I'm still adjusting, he admitted. I was used to things being one way. I know, she replied, but I can't go back. And that was the defining line of this season. She could not go back. Moral lesson number 6. Growth will cost you comfort, yours and sometimes others. But the cost of stagnation is far greater. Months turned into a year. Elena enrolled officially in a part-time doctoral program, something she once thought impossible. The acceptance email arrived quietly on a Tuesday afternoon while she was helping her daughter with homework. She stared at the screen. Tears filled her eyes. Not because she had been validated, but because she had persisted. She walked into the living room where Ryan was reviewing flight schedules. I got in, she said softly. He looked up. For a brief second, she saw something flicker. Fear, pride, uncertainty. Then he stood and hugged her. I'm proud of you. This time, the words didn't feel conditional. They felt earned. Their marriage didn't transform into a fairy tale. They still had disagreements, still had long conversations about logistics, finances, parenting. But something fundamental had changed. Elena no longer asked for permission to dream, and Ryan no longer expected her to. One night, as they sat on the porch after the children were asleep, he spoke quietly. I didn't realize how much I benefited from you staying small. She didn't respond immediately. Thank you for not giving up on us, he added. She thought carefully before answering. I didn't stay because I was afraid to leave, she said. I stayed because I believed we could grow. He nodded. That was the difference. Staying from fear shrinks you. Staying from conviction strengthens you. Over time, their dynamic began to resemble something healthier. Not perfect, not effortless, but intentional. Elena started speaking at local women's networking events. She shared honestly about delayed dreams, about compromise, about reclaiming identity inside marriage rather than outside of it. Women approached her afterward with tears in their eyes. I thought it was just me. I didn't realize I was disappearing. You gave me language for what I feel. She realized her story wasn't unique. It was common, too common, and that realization deepened her purpose. Moral lesson number 7. You can love deeply and still lose yourself. The goal is not to avoid love. It is to remain whole inside it. By the end of that year, Elena stood in front of a small auditorium of young women at a university seminar. She wasn't speaking as a victim. She wasn't speaking as a cautionary tragedy. She was speaking as a woman who paused, reflected, and rebuilt. Marriage is not the enemy, she told them. Silencing yourself is. The room was quiet. You can build a family, she continued. You can love fully, but never confuse sacrifice with self-erasure. When she returned home that evening, Ryan had put the children to bed. He handed her a cup of tea. How was it? She smiled. Full circle. Because years ago, she had taken down a 5-year plan from her wall. Now she understood something deeper. Plans can be postponed. Dreams can be delayed. But identity, if protected, can be restored. Act 4 closes not with perfection, but with partnership in progress. Because the real transformation was not just Elena reclaiming herself. It was both of them learning that love must expand to survive. And the final act would reveal what happens when a woman becomes whole. Not in spite of marriage, but consciously within it. By the time Elena turned 35, she no longer introduced herself by her relationship status. Not because she rejected her marriage. Not because she regretted her family. But because she had finally integrated every part of herself into one whole woman. Mother, wife, scholar, consultant, speaker, not fragments, not roles competing for oxygen, but identities coexisting with intention. Her doctoral journey was not glamorous. It required sacrifice, early mornings before the children woke, late nights after they slept, weekends filled with research papers instead of brunch invitations. There were moments she questioned her stamina, moments she wondered if she had started too late. But every time doubt whispered, she remembered something critical. Late is not lost. Delayed is not denied. And most importantly, growth is not a race. Ryan changed too, not instantly, not magically, but gradually. Therapy continued. Conversations deepened. He confronted insecurities he didn't know he carried. He learned that partnership meant celebrating expansion, not fearing it. One evening, after attending one of Elena's university presentations, he sat quietly in the car before starting the engine. I saw you up there, he said. She looked at him carefully. You weren't nervous, he continued. You weren't small. You were powerful. She didn't smile immediately. Years ago, she would have glowed from that compliment. Now she simply absorbed it. That's who I've always been, she replied softly. He nodded. I know. That acknowledgement mattered more than applause, because it meant he finally saw the full version of her, not the edited one. Their children began noticing too. Her son once asked, Mom, why do you study so much? She knelt beside him and said, Because learning makes me better, and when I'm better, I love you better. That answer stayed with him. Years later, it would shape how he viewed ambition, not as selfishness but as stewardship. Moral lesson number 8. When you pursue growth, you are not abandoning your family. You are modeling strength for them. Elena completed her doctorate at 37. The ceremony was simple. Caps tossed in the air. Names called one by one. When hers echoed through the auditorium, she walked across the stage with steady steps. Not hurried, not desperate, earned. In the crowd, Ryan stood. The children stood. Her parents stood. And as she accepted her degree, she didn't think about the years she lost. She thought about the years she reclaimed. Regret no longer owned her. Reflection did. After the ceremony, her father hugged her tightly. You built it strong, he whispered. She smiled through tears, because this time she had built it without abandoning herself. Her work expanded beyond consulting. She launched workshops focused on identity and leadership for women navigating marriage, motherhood, and ambition. Not anti-marriage, not anti-family, but pro-wholeness. She spoke honestly. I almost lost myself trying to be good. The room would always grow quiet at that sentence, because so many women understood it. She explained that goodness without boundaries becomes self-erasure. That sacrifice without voice becomes resentment. That love without alignment becomes quiet suffering. Her message was not rebellion. It was responsibility. Guard your heart. Guard your mind. Guard your becoming. One night, years after that first confrontation at the kitchen table, Elena and Ryan sat outside watching their children play in the backyard. Life was not perfect. There were still disagreements, still seasons of stress, still moments of recalibration, but the imbalance was gone. Respect had replaced assumption. Support had replaced subtle dismissal. I'm glad you didn't stay silent, Ryan said quietly. She looked at him thoughtfully. I'm glad I woke up, she answered. And that was the truth. The turning point of her life was not marriage. It was awakening. She realized something profound that she now teaches everywhere she goes. Marriage does not complete you. It reveals you. If you enter it unfinished, the cracks widen. If you enter it whole or commit to becoming whole, it can refine you. But no relationship can carry the weight of your abandoned identity. That responsibility is yours. Years later, at a women's leadership conference in Chicago, Elena stood backstage preparing to speak to thousands. She closed her eyes for a moment. She saw the 23-year-old girl with the 5-year plan taped to the wall. She saw the young mother crying quietly in the bathroom. She saw the woman packing a small bag to breathe, and she felt compassion for all of them. Not shame, not anger, compassion, because growth requires grace for who you were. When she stepped onto the stage, she didn't start with statistics. She started with truth. There was a time, she said into the microphone, when I confused being needed with being fulfilled. The audience leaned in. I thought shrinking was kindness. I thought silence was maturity. I thought postponing myself was love. She paused. It wasn't. The applause that followed was not for achievement. It was for recognition. Recognition of a story so many women lived quietly. Moral lesson number 9. You are allowed to evolve even if it disrupts expectations. After the conference, a young woman approached her, eyes glossy. I'm engaged, she whispered, and I'm scared I'll lose myself.
Elena smiled gently.
Don't cancel your wedding, she said. Just don't cancel yourself. That became a line people quoted often. Not canceling love, not canceling partnership, but refusing to cancel identity. At 40, Elena looked back on her life not with regret, but with wisdom. If she had waited longer to marry, would it have been easier? Maybe. If she had asserted herself sooner, would there have been less pain? Possibly. But she understood something deeper now. There are lessons you cannot download. You must live them. And what mattered most was not that she stumbled. It was that she stood back up. Moral lesson number 10. It is never too late to reclaim yourself. But the earlier you guard your voice, the less you will have to rebuild. Her marriage endured not because she endured silently, but because she demanded evolution. Ryan grew because he chose to grow. And that is the final truth of this story. You cannot force someone to evolve with you. You can only decide whether you will stop evolving to keep them comfortable. As the years passed, their relationship matured into something steadier than romance, respect. And respect is stronger than butterflies. One quiet evening, long after the children were older and the house was calm, Ryan asked her a question. If you could go back to 23, would you change anything? She thought for a long moment. Then she answered honestly. I would still love you, she said, but I wouldn't abandon me. He nodded slowly, and that was enough. So to every woman listening, to every young girl with a 5-year plan taped to her wall, to every wife who feels invisible in her own home, to every fiancé afraid of losing her spark, hear this clearly. It is not wrong to love deeply. It is not wrong to build a family. It is not wrong to compromise. But it is wrong to disappear. Guard your becoming. Protect your voice. Finish yourself even if it takes longer than expected. Because dreams can be delayed, but they do not have to die. And when a woman becomes whole, She doesn't destroy her home. She strengthens it. If the story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs it. Because sometimes the most powerful transformation begins with one simple decision. I will not shrink anymore. Tell us how this video resonates with you and where you're watching from.